has changed since I left the air yesterday. We did get the grand jury decision. And as I told you yesterday, no facts, evidence, none of it will matter to radical leftists and others who are hell-bent on attacking. Now, the facts that we knew yesterday are confirmed today with even additional details. Number one, this had nothing to do with race. Zero. Number one, Officer Darren Wilson's shooting and killing of Michael Brown had nothing to do with race. Period. Still, they talk about race. Still, the president talks about race. Still, the attorney general talks about race. Still, the media talk about race. Michael Brown was shot, in essence, because the officer was defending himself. Both in the squad car and later when Michael Brown charged him. Period. This has nothing to do with racial injustice. Nothing whatsoever to do with racial injustice. And let me be clear. The Ferguson grand jury got it right. It understood that its job was to do justice based on the available facts. The prosecutor got it right. A Democrat. He didn't play games. He didn't cowboy the thing. He played it straight down the middle. Justice. The grand jury and the prosecutor deserve enormous credit. They deserve our praise. It could have been very easy for them to give in to the mob and bring even the least of the offenses, involuntary manslaughter. But they didn't. They didn't buckle. The justice system actually worked. And in this instance, it ought to be celebrated, and so should the people with the courage who upheld it. That does not include the president. It certainly does not include the attorney general. And so now, what do we have? We have race baiting, we have out-of-control emotions, we have criminality. It's the left. The left, they ignore science, they ignore evidence, they ignore experience, they ignore knowledge, just like everything else, whether it's global warming or Obamacare. These things exist to be exploited. It's time for us to speak up for law enforcement. Law enforcement has been extremely restrained. It's time for us to speak out in defense of Officer Wilson, who's owed an apology. He's owed an apology. Now, Ferguson, the community, is not rioting. There are not 40, 50,000 citizens of Ferguson on the street. There are 500 people, 200 people, 1,000 people, 1,500 people in a well-organized anarchy movement. The same anarchy movement that's been in Seattle, the same anarchy movement that was behind Occupy Wall Street, the same anarchy movement that pops up, organized through social media, looking for any event, any tragedy, any issue to cling on to try and destroy our country. This isn't new. Under a different facade, it occurred in the 60s. Under a different facade, it occurred in the 40s. And so forth. But the people of Ferguson are not destroying their own town. And the overwhelming majority of businesses being looted and burned and ransacked are owned by blacks. You know who does that sort of thing? Leftist, radical revolutionaries who see